All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Sarah, can you see my screen fine?
Yes, looks good.
Thank you so much. So today I just wanted to acknowledge where we are. We acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohubs people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, voices to form a more just and equitable society. Today, we're going to be discussing the strategies connected with local consumers with Snohomish County farms and farmers. We will hear from three speakers. Christy Bell of Little Roots Ranch will address what it's like to be a farmer today and the considerations of her non-perfect produce to get it to market. Stevie Wallace from the Sno-Isle Food Co-op will discuss the challenges in securing local food and supporting buying behavior at a regional co-op. And finally, Anna Santo of Peak Sustainability Group will summarize the results of our 2021 consumer survey conducted in partnership with the SLS Sustainable Land Strategies communications team focused on consumer attitudes, habits, and preferences for purchasing local food in Snohomish County. Afterward, we'll have a discussion about what you all find to be interesting about this data and how we might use it to support local food purchasing and farmland preservation in Snohomish County. Before I pass it off to the guests, I'm hoping to provide a brief overview of the purpose and vision of our survey. So as we know, agriculture is economically, socially, and ecologically important in Snohomish County. According to the 2017 agricultural census, there were 1,558 farms in Snohomish County that produced more than $157 million worth of products and supported 2,774 farmers. However, the benefits of farming are not just economic. Farmland and open space associated with farmland contribute to the local sense of place and community identity, local food security, and provide nutritious, fresh, and delicious food and fiber to our community. Farms and farmland can also provide important services that connect to the health of the ecosystems we all depend on, such as reducing flooding, cycling nutrients, filtering water, providing wildlife habitat, and sequestering carbon. Yet despite its importance, farmland is disappearing. In Snohomish County, between 2012 and 2017, for example, the acres of farmland in Snohomish County dropped from 70,863 to 63,671. This loss of farmland is largely due to shifts in the global economy, changing markets, environmental regulations, and increased conversion of agricultural lands to non-agricultural uses, like urbanization. Oops, back one. Protecting farmland is a local priority for the economy, salmon recovery, flooding, and protecting Snohomish County's open space and way of life. In 2010, the county worked with state agencies, tribes, and other stakeholders to launch the Sustainable Land Strategy. The goal of the initiative is to accommodate both habitat restoration for threatened and endangered species and protection of agricultural resource lands in a manner that would generate multi-benefits for the agricultural, tribal, cultural, and ecological productivity and health in Snohomish County. The mission of SLS is to set the table, to develop understanding, relationships, and strategies to create and achieve a shared vision and beneficial outcomes for our watersheds. Our vision is to support healthy and vibrant cultures and ecosystems in our watersheds with economically viable agriculture and fisheries. So we think that one way to accomplish our mission is supporting local farmers and fisheries to help consumers develop habits of purchasing their produce from local farms with good environmental practices. Agriculture in Snohomish County has been undergoing significant changes over the last 2 decades. It has shifted from dairy farms to smaller diversified crop farms, agritourism, and pumpkin patches. According to the 2017 agriculture census, 96 of the 1,558 farms in Snohomish County were family farms, but just 18 sell their products directly to consumers. At SLS, we're exploring the idea that making it easier for local consumers to purchase their household groceries from Snohomish County farms is one way to keep local farmers in business and thus prevent further loss of farmland. But we don't know very much about the barriers and potential solutions to increasing local food purchasing in Snohomish County, what those might be. So we decided to develop a survey. We thought that a good place to start would be to understand how and why people who are already engaging with the local food economy, at least in a limited way, and how are they making their choices? We developed a survey and distributed it to the email and social media listservs of locals, farmers markets, CSAs, or consumer sustained agriculture, and food co-ops. We offered a $75 prize draw to encourage more participation. And our objectives were as follows. We were looking at the shopping habits and factors that influence them, the stated priorities for the farming practices that they would most and least like to support, and experiences of shopping local, and awareness of and interest in the actions to support farmland preservation in Snohomish County. So I'm thrilled to introduce the women that are going to follow me, Christy Bell and Stevie Wallace and Anna Santo. And one item of note, Christy Bell just recently participated with us in a different facet of SLS work, which was a 2-week training on digital storytelling. And so I am pleased to debut Christy's video to you all here, where she talks about perfect and what that definition means to her as a farmer. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy her film.
I once heard that people shouldn't eat something that a worm wouldn't nibble on. And it's really interesting because the food we see at the store is visually perfect and missing the telltale sign that an insect has sampled it. But what does perfect produce even mean? Can perfect looking produce not be perfect in other ways? I am a farmer. Every day I have to make hard choices in order to make my farm successful and sustainable. I struggle with growing in harmony with nature and still making a profit. I have a beautiful wooded area that surrounds me. The trees that host many animals and birds also block the sunlight needed to grow bountiful crops. The give and take my customers and I work through on the farm is producing hyperlocal produce, but also needing to cover the cost of reduced yields as a result of the sustainable growing practices. I am grateful for my community for understanding the mission of our farm and the endeavors of sustainably grown produce. Most people get a little uneasy when there are small holes in their vegetables, but they do not think about the harmful chemicals used to prevent those holes. Even organic growing methods can be toxic to pollinators, insects, and worms. There are no easy ways to control pests on a farm. In Washington, the saying is, all waters lead to our rivers and oceans. Water runoff from farms containing dangerous chemicals will hurt the ecosystems beyond the farms. Is there a way for our communities to redefine perfect produce in a way that focuses less on visual perfection and more on biological impact and preservation of our lands? Is there a way for all of us to realize the give and take of buying produce? How can we all focus on long-term benefits as opposed to quick visual appeal? Imagine a world where farms, communities, and ecosystems work together for the stability of future farms, communities, and ecosystems. One where we nurture the land and the land nurtures us back. Now that would be perfect.
Okay, with that, I will stop sharing. But I love that video. And I'm so excited that we will be able to debut the other 12, well, there's 12 in total videos here in the next few weeks. We're going to be putting them up on our Instagram and different places. So, and it was fun watching Christy watch your video because we all got to be a part of that process and see people's stories come to life. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Christy Bell of Little Roots Ranch.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christy, and I run Little Roots Ranch, a small farm in Stanwood, Washington. My farm is best classified as a market garden, meaning my garden is more like a really large garden as far as variety, as opposed to a huge traditional farm that grows one kind of crop or a monocrop. I grow on approximately 2 acres surrounded by native trees and shrubs. I practice no-till and regenerative practices to feed my soil while also growing organically, though I am not certified. My customer is my local community, and my produce is sold directly via the farm stand, on the farm, or through the CSA. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. My customers, I like to call them families, prepay for the season and receive a weekly box or bag of fruits and veggies grown right here on the farm. Having direct sales channels helps me to receive the most money by selling directly to the end customer. This year will be my 3rd year farming. I started in 2020, but nothing really happened. Nothing big really happened that year, right? My relationship with my customers is one of the most important aspects of the farm. And in talking to them, it helped me realize a real disconnect that people have with our food. I've talked to people who ask me if I plant everything on Monday for the harvest or sale on the following Sunday. And I was quite shocked by this because I spend all year in some capacity planning and working on each crop. I really wish I had planted tomatoes and melons on Monday and they were ready on Sunday. But the truth is that farming is really hard and there's so much more that goes into it. I always say that I left my 40-hour work week, a corporate job, to work 90 hours a week instead. But honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. I also realized that people don't understand the barriers to farming, like especially with starting up, and how hard it is to consistently bring food to market. As a farmer, I am at the whim of Mother Nature. A hailstorm or some severe wind can knock out most of my crops, and there's nothing I can do but start over. In Washington, in just the past year, we have seen unprecedented highs and lows. The heat wave caused all of my tomatoes to drop their flowers, resulting in a large gap in tomato production. The freezing temperatures we had at the end of December took out most of my overwintering crops. When you purchase vegetables at a grocery store, those vegetables were grown to be there, meaning they were grown for transportation in general. The red tomatoes you see were picked green, unripe, so that they would last longer. Of course, the tomatoes will have a thicker skin to resist cracking and bruising along their journey to your home. These factors, plus many others, place transportation over flavor, of course, as a necessity. Vine-ripened tomatoes from, say, your garden or a local farm or farmer co-op are far superior in taste to grocery store tomatoes that have traveled to be there, but they also won't last as long on the shelf. There is a term that always makes me think really hard about the meaning, and that is perfect produce. When we're looking for produce at the store, we may prefer the most perfect looking veggies without considering how they were grown that way. In nature, bugs and insects survive on eating leaves of plants growing around them. Only a complete physical barrier, which is not feasible on any scale of farm, or by the use of chemical or pesticides. It's really easy just to till the ground. The tilling can happen as fast as a tractor can move. Then one can spray a pre-emergent spray that keeps the weeds down. After that spray, the growing plants are sprayed with artificial fertilizers to make up for the depleted soil, and spraying again with a pesticide or herbicide and to keep insects off until the crop is harvested. This is not a sustainable practice because the crops are being propped up artificially without actually addressing the problems in the soil. It is hard to take time for crop rotations and crop diversity and nurture the soil. It's hard to take losses if your crops are showing signs of insect damage. Farmers use sprays because produce showing a few nibbles isn't acceptable to many consumers. But you really shouldn't want to be the only one who is willing to eat something. That should be a red flag if your food isn't part of the ecosystem. Now, pests are unavoidable, even with the best natural conditions like crop rotation and diversity, though those do really help. One of the largest barriers to farming are the startup costs and the learning, especially when you were not raised on a farm like me. Sure, there are internships, but the pay is not enough to support somebody coming from a corporate job or a family. And a farm isn't just selling vegetables. A farmer must set up a wash pack station, a walk-in cooler, multiple temperatures if you're that lucky. All of the tools needed. It's an exhaustive list, really. Equipment, greenhouses, seeds, seeding and harvesting tools, and many other things. These items need to be purchased before the farm is successful because it will not grow without them. I remember trying to store produce in my personal fridge, and until then, I thought I had a good sized fridge. A challenge with bringing produce to market is picking it at the right time and being able to sell it before it goes bad. Plants continue their life cycle by producing seed. That's hardwired in them. That's their whole goal in life is future generations. Farmers do not want most plants to go to seed because then the crop becomes unmarketable. Let's say like a radish, for instance, when it goes to seed, it takes all of the energy from the root and puts it into developing seeds, thus altering the flavor of the radish, in the case of the radish, making it more spicy and changing its texture. So the crop cannot stay in the ground for too long. Some crops are more forgiving, radishes are not, but they also won't keep in storage for long term, which creates a delicate dance that the farmer must perform to work on timing. Again, also dealing with Mother Nature, who cannot be predicted. Another challenge I face as a local farmer is managing expectations. With a grocery store, people are not used to eating seasonally because every kind of food is available at all times of the year. I will never be able to have tomatoes in May without supplemental heat. People are also not used to eating regionally because there are some crops like pineapples and avocados that my farm will never be able to grow. I tried to educate people on growing conditions of the seasons. And like when someone has a CSA box that spans through spring, summer, and fall, the spring starts with more of the hardy leafy greens and lots of brassicas, and brassicas meaning cabbage and cauliflower, kale, things like that. And lots of root veggies rolling into the typical garden stuff like tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers, summer squash, and then finishing with what I like to think of as like soup making stuff, which is like the onions and leeks and winter squashes. And I understand, wanting to eat things all times of the year, but in relation to a local farm, there's only so many things that we can produce or things that we can produce given our climate. Lastly, I wanted to talk about one of the least talked about challenges, and that's the emotional toll of farming. There is always, and I mean always, a never-ending and overwhelming list of things to do, and it never ends. warding off feelings of depression, isolation, and feeling like a failure are all struggles that many farmers, if not all, face. Mental health is really important in farming, and it's hard to find time to spend with friends and family, especially once the season kicks off. Halfway through the summer is when the extra long days slowly turn to burnout, and farmers are just surviving to make it through to the fall. I really do not think people comprehend how hard farmers work and that it's year round, all temperatures, everything. The winter is just as busy completing all the tasks that were deferred for the past 9 months and planning for the next growing season, buying seeds and supplies, and honestly, it never ends. I wouldn't trade farming for anything, but it's not just tossing a few seeds in the ground and then collecting a beautiful bounty. There are so many aspects that go into growing, and I am thankful to everyone who chooses to support small local farms in any fashion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christy. I think your perspective is wonderful to share, so we all understand. Now I'd like to pass it over to Stevie Wallace with the Sno-Isle Food Co-op.
Morning, everybody. My name is Stevie. I work at the Sno-Isle Food Co-op in Everett. I serve as what's called a category manager there. So I am the primary recipient of everybody who would like to sell at the store. I help with sourcing and community support for all of that has to do with the store. Going to piggyback off of the challenge that 2020 started us off with. It hasn't been an easy couple of years in retail, which, I mean, we can all kind of agree. It's been kind of rough on everybody, but being on the service side and sourcing side has been incredibly stressful. I mean, I've been working in this industry for 15 years, and I have never had so many gray hairs sprout on my head in total as I have in the last 18, 24 months. So I have 3 major challenges that I like to talk about. The first one is just sheer connection. Connecting with smaller producers is such a difficult concept for a lot of big regional grocers. They have huge teams in distribution that do that for them. We don't have any of that. It's just myself and the people at my store who stock the shelves. We have a team of buyers who are very specialized in their departments, who have these, first base name connections with these local producers. Like our chill department, we've been working with Old Sylvana Farms, Jim, for 12 years. And that took a long time to even find that connection. But I mean, it takes a lot of work, and it's really surprising when we do have, every now and then somebody will come in and say, why isn't more of X department a local producer? Why are there not enough local offerings, especially off season? It can be very difficult to fill that customer need. So yeah, it's hard. The second thing is the idea of instant gratification from a shopper. That idea that seasonality shouldn't apply when they come in the store to purchase what they need. Just alone in January, we've sold more pints of raspberries, I think, than we did in the last 4 months combined. I don't know what that rush is about, but it is that idea that a lot of people, when they go shopping for what they deem at even a local community store, if we don't have those off-season items that they're looking for, the entire view of that store can get a little skewed. It's really difficult just on sheer local producers alone to get people to purchase en masse and really mindfully support their local communities if we can't still give them that like one-stop shop kind of a thing. And then the third thing, that we have a really hard time with is just accessibility to our community. We're very small. We're just turning 25 this year, and it's taken us this long to even have enough of a team to secure platforms such as this to be able to talk to our community. A lot of us, you know, we just haven't had that opportunity. So yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So a lot of what we're doing to try to combat this is, you know, that hyper locality of shopping, especially like seasonally at like a farmer's market, is really difficult to secure on the off-seasonal months. So in the store, we have a personal and budding business connection with the City of Everett and the facilities planning committee there to further see how we can support those around in Snohomish County that we work with. So hyper-local producers like Christi, and stretching out into, you know, different communities like Lake Stevens or even Edmonds who might not have that kind of support. And the educational impact that we lost due to COVID, it's astronomical. I mean, we used to have weekly meeting sessions just in our classroom that was just owners who would come by and members of the community just to communicate and chat. And we would have seasonal spreads that you could snack on, just those little tiny things that you don't really think about. That connection, when it dried up, a lot of that mindful idea of purchasing and like supporting that community was no longer priority for a lot of people. So it's trying to get back to that is a very difficult process, but we're getting there. Another thing that we've been working on is actually working with the Everett Farmers Market Board to become a launching pad for smaller farms in the area off season for CSAs and pop-ups and all of that kind of stuff. It's a little more challenging than I would like to admit it is. But one of the biggest things that holds us back is, as a lot of people who shop at the co-op know, just our produce department alone is a USDA certified organic department. So we do not have the option to be able to sell produce that is not certified or authentically the certification that is grown organically. We're not allowed to sell that. So that's a really big barrier that we have to be able to provide that accessibility that, say, the farmers market can. I think that's all the bullets I had. Yes. Not a lot of details to say on the rest, but yeah, that's all I got. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Stevie. The other day she mentioned how much love goes into a head of lettuce in the store. And I just think that that is true. It takes a village to get what we see in stores on the shelf. So thank you so much. With that, I would like to turn it over to Anna Santo, and she has been our hero through this process. When Lindsay Desmond and I from Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife were trying to think about what we would do for this, and the goal really was to educate farmers about what the local consumers are looking for. We were thinking about a survey and a Google form, and Anna has taken this survey to a whole new level. It was peer reviewed through her university, and so it's gone through a lot of steps along the way, talking with farmers about what they thought they wanted to be on this survey and if we were on the right track or not. So a lot of work has gone into this, and it was very interesting to hear the results. So Anna.
Let me figure out how to unmute myself. Hi, everyone. My name's Anna, like Kari said. I just wanted to start by saying thank you to everyone for coming and for the presentations that we heard from Kari, Christi, and Stevie. I'm gonna take a few minutes to walk you through. Can you see the
Not seeing your
presentation?
slide.
Oh, you're not seeing it yet. Okay, sorry. Let me try that again.
Beautiful waves of color.
How's that?
Yeah, respondent demographics, great.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to pick up where Kari left off talking about our survey that we put together. I want to just walk through a basic summary of the results from the survey And I'm going to show you a bunch of charts and graphs fairly quickly, but I'll be happy to share the presentation afterward with anyone who's interested if you want to look at any of them again. So I want to start by giving you a sense of who responded to the survey, and then I'll move into the more substantive survey results. So this chart is showing that the distribution of respondents' ages broken down by their gender identity. So you can see here that most of the respondents were women who are represented by the purple bars, and that they were ranging in age from their 20s all the way up to their 80s. There were far fewer male and non-binary respondents, but you can see that those who did respond also represented a range of ages that was quite wide. The folks who responded to the survey were mostly college educated, with 94% having at least some post-secondary education and 63% having a bachelor's degree or higher. The respondents were mostly identifying as politically liberal or middle of the road, and they were predominantly white. This chart is showing the size of the community where respondents currently live, and it's broken down by the county of their primary residence. So you can see that respondents were mostly from Snohomish County, which is in red. That makes sense because the survey was about Snohomish County. They were from a wide range of community sizes, ranging from rural areas all the way up to large cities. And there were a few respondents who also lived primarily in King Island and other Washington counties, but engaged with Snohomish County local food economy. A wide range of household incomes were represented among the respondents, but most were between $50,000 to $150,000 annually. The yellow chart on the right shows respondents' employment status. And so working for pay was the most common employment status, but you can also see that some respondents were in other situations, such as being retired, managing a household, going to school, or other situations. Interestingly, only 2 of the people who responded to the survey said they actually work in anything related to the local food industry or economy. We also wanted to understand respondents' relationships with farming to see if that had an impact on their purchasing behaviors. And so we asked how strongly people agreed with a variety of statements about their ties to farms and farming. And as you can see in this chart, on average, people felt around neutral or in slight disagreement with most of the statements we asked them about. They did slightly agree that local food purchasing was a priority for their friends and family. However, they mostly disagreed that they had grown up in or currently live in agricultural communities, or that they themselves identify as farmers or people who are growing a lot of their food. Before we move on, I want to show you another version of this same data and explain how to read 2 charts together, because I'm going to show you some similar ones throughout the rest of this talk. So the chart I just had up is now in the upper left corner, and you can see that that one had little dots. Those dots represent the average response among all of the respondents to a particular question. This chart on the right is showing the distribution of responses. So with these, what I want you to look at is how many peaks are there in each graph? And if there are multiple peaks in a graph, like here, that suggests that there may be stronger polarization among the individual respondents. If there's just one peak, like up here, that suggests that a majority of individuals within the population were kind of trending towards a similar answer on that question. And the color and the order of these 2 charts will match. So you can kind of look at the average and then the distribution together if you want to. So for example, with these 2 charts, you can see that people who responded to the survey were generally agreeing that local food purchasing was a priority among their friends and family. and that they were not themselves identifying as farmers. But there was some polarization between people who felt that they maybe did and did not have strong ties to farms and farming, or that they grow their own food, or that they grew up in an agricultural community or have friends and family that are farmers. So next, I'd like to discuss respondents' current shopping habits and the factors that they said influence them. So we asked 2 questions to understand their current shopping habits. First, we asked how frequently they thought they got produce from different places. And they said they most commonly got produce at the supermarket and at farms or farmers markets. However, social science will tell you over and over that people often kind of unintentionally will overestimate how often they do behaviors that they might perceive as good or positive. So it's also important to ask people about their most recent actual behavior to understand their habits. So we also asked participants where they had last shopped and why they had shopped there. We found that most people had last shopped at the supermarket, and then after that, a farm or a farmer's market. Others said that they had gone to the co-op or to Costco, or maybe to the food bank or to some kind of free produce exchange or even wild foraging. When asked why they had gone to the place that they had last gone, participants gave a variety of open-ended responses, which we grouped into these 7 themes. And the most common responses by theme were the convenience of going there or the selection that was available at that particular place. And the most common convenience factors that they brought up were the time that that place was open, whether that was the hours, the day, or the seasonality of that place being open, as well as the proximity. So the distance to either their home or their work. They mentioned some other things which you can kind of scan through here. In terms of selection factors, the most common factors that they were bringing up were being able to get everything that they needed at that one place. That goes back to what Stevie was saying about one-stop shopping, and also wanting to be able to get organic produce. The other themes that emerged were some principles for how people shopped and what was important to them, such as wanting to support local farms or businesses or to eat seasonally. They also mentioned the quality of items, the value, the predictability or consistency of what might be at that place where they were shopping, as well as the experience of shopping at that place. We also asked people about how they shopped, and on average, they were saying that they are paying close attention to food labels, but that time, budget, dietary restrictions, and transportation were not generally strong limiting factors on average for people. So if you look at the distributions in the corner, though, you could see that for some individuals, budget, time, and dietary restrictions were actually very important considerations, but on average, they weren't for everybody. So next, we asked people to rate how important it was to them that their food was produced using different types of farming practices. And we found that on average, having produce that was produced by farms that were offering living wages, considering water quality protection, and being grown using organic practices, but not necessarily organic certification, were kind of the 3 most important practices among respondents on average. Being certified organic was of the least importance on average, although everything was at least moderately important to people. But when you take a look at the distribution down here for certified organic, you can see that it was highly important to some and also very low importance to others, and some found it kind of neutral. So that's an interesting point of polarization. And I want to take just a moment here to acknowledge that people often act in disagreement with their values for a wide variety of reasons. So although this chart represents what respondents say is most important to them when they're consciously thinking about it, it doesn't necessarily reflect what participants will actually choose to do or to support in reality when they're faced with really difficult trade-offs. We also had 3 opportunities for respondents to provide further open-ended feedback about how they shop and what's important to them. And we combined their responses from these 3 questions and counted how many respondents brought up each of the topics on the left at least once in any of their comments. And as you can see, the most common comments were statements about wanting to buy local, the price of the produce, quality, being able to get organic produce, worker wages and safety, and along down here. So you could take a moment to kind of scan those issues. But we should probably approach this data with some caution because participants were somewhat primed by our questions to bring some of these topics up. And so by that, I mean that since they had just been thinking about some of these things, they may have been more likely to bring those same ideas up in their comments. But what's really interesting to me about this list of things here is how many new ideas respondents brought up that hadn't previously been mentioned in the survey. And so those are things like mentioning COVID protocols of the place where they're shopping, their own maybe forgetfulness or lack of planning. They're concerned about supporting equity and racial justice via their food purchasing choices, the relationships that they had with the farms and the farmers themselves, and having perhaps accessibility like ADA accessibility or sufficient parking to be able to shop there. We also asked several questions to gauge people's general impressions of local food, as well as their experiences with farmers markets and CSAs. First, we asked people to write the first 3 words or phrases that came to mind when they were thinking about local food. And the size of the word in this word cloud represents how frequently that word appeared in respondents' answers. And as you can see, the most common words were fresh, sustainable, community, farmers, quality, healthy, expensive, and seasonal. But we also wanted to understand whether these words people were using to describe their impressions were generally positive or negative words. So we used a database of word valence and arousal scores, which was developed by Werner et al. And we did this to explore what these words suggested about how they were feeling about local food in Snohomish County. And so the valence score suggests how much a word corresponds to either unhappy or happy feelings. The arousal score is a measure of how strongly people are reacting to a word, and it ranges from weak to strong reactions. So as you can see, the words in general that people were using kind of fell in this bottom right corner. And so those are mostly neutral to happy words, but they're actually eliciting a moderate to weak reaction. So I think this is really interesting to take a look at and understand what some of these perhaps stronger words are that people are relating to when they're thinking about local food, and think about how that might support perhaps future marketing. We also asked a few questions to understand experiences shopping at farmers markets and CSAs. And most respondents said that they shop at farmers markets at least once per year. And on average, when we asked them why they're going to the farmers market, they mostly said they're going because they want to support local farms and businesses and to buy groceries. Buying artisan goods, eating out, and just going for the experience were highly important to some, but less important to others. Respondents also offered comments about what attracts and deters them from going to the farmers market. And so we grouped these into different categories. And so things that are attracting people to the farmers market are both the products and the experience. And so you can kind of take a look at some of the things that were that people liked about both the products and the experience of going to the farmers market. So obviously the freshness, quality, seasonality, the taste of the items. In terms of the experience, they were thinking about the atmosphere, community, convenience, and having a fun experience, those types of things. Things that were deterring people from going to the farmers markets included things like construction, being concerned about COVID, being concerned about value of the items there, as well as some inconvenience factors like parking and heat and that stuff. We also asked people about their experiences with CSAs. And again, this is community supported agriculture, like Christy was speaking about. Most respondents said that they're not currently participating in CSAs, but 30% said that they had done so in the past, and 22% said that they were participating. And so we asked those who are not participating about why they didn't sign up for them. And we offered a variety of potential reasons that they might not be enrolled. And most people felt kind of neutral to in slight disagreement with the close-ended reasons that we offered. The ones they most agreed with on average were that CSAs were too expensive, or that they were providing more food than what they actually needed, or that they were inconvenient for them to pick up. But we also asked for open-ended comments about why they're not participating in CSAs. And given that they didn't agree with the reasons that we gave them, this is particularly important to understand. The most common themes that emerged in their comments were the selection of items that they were getting in their CSA box. So in particular, some felt they were getting undesirable or unfamiliar items that they just weren't sure what to do with, they didn't prefer, or that were too limited in selection. It was also quite common to hear that people just generally lacked information about CSAs and what they were and how to find one. And several people mentioned that they didn't like feeling like they were wasting if they weren't going to be able to finish the food before it spoiled. And then some had concerns about the value or the ability to use their food assistance with their CSAs. We asked people who are participating in CSAs for comments about what they like and didn't like. And they again said that they liked a lot of things about the actual products themselves. Many also discussed liking the experience of participating in a CSA, and they emphasized things like their connection they felt to farms or the farmer, the convenience of it, or the dynamic experience of getting different and new items each week. People said that they didn't like the experience of wasting food again, or feeling like meal planning, pickup, and having limited choices sometimes inconvenienced their ability to plan and cook meals. We also asked a few questions to get a sense of how aware survey respondents were about the issue of farmland loss and preservation in Snohomish County, as well as whether or not it's an issue that they're interested in taking action on, and if so, what they would most like to do. And we found that on average, most respondents were aware and concerned about farmland loss in Snohomish County. In particular, people agreed that it was really important to preserve farms that were selling products locally. They felt less strongly about preserving farms that export goods, and even less strongly that farmland loss was actually affecting them personally. And we asked participants about their level of interest in a variety of hypothetical actions that could be done either privately or publicly to support farmland preservation. And we really wanted to understand in general what kinds of actions people were finding most appealing. And on average, we found that people were, somewhat interested to neutral about all of the actions that we proposed. They were most interested in more privately oriented actions, such as changing their own diets, or perhaps voting for a local ordinance to require local food to be available in grocery stores, or signing a petition to a local official about this issue. And they were least interested in actions like volunteering or getting involved with NGOs working on the issue. And finally, I just want to provide a few quotes. A few respondents offered ideas about how to support local food customers and farmers, which I kind of grouped into categories, and I'm just going to summarize a couple of those ideas. So some suggested additional outreach or marketing strategies, such as designating a local section in grocery stores with signage about local farms or families. They suggested advertising CSAs more, especially at farmers markets. One person, for example, said that they said, we go to farmers markets in Washington and Oregon. We always purchase fruits and vegetables and have never had anyone ask us if we would be interested in a CSA. There's also opportunities to discuss these issues at pumpkin patches. Some participants requested additional availability of local food products. And so they were wanting, indoor year-round farmers markets, more roadside stands, etc. Several participants suggested some potential regulatory solutions. So for example, this first person said the county has to stop allowing the destruction of prime farmland for housing. It doesn't matter how much local food we buy, it will still be more profitable to sell out to a developer. Another person suggested exempting farmland from property taxes and saying that developers should pay a punitive amount of back taxes to discourage taking the property out of farming. I'm gonna skip forward. A couple of others suggested some opportunities related to education, training, or making it easier for people to learn how to deal with local food. So for example, this first person said, the value placed in cooking and eating is an important part of the conversation. Learning new recipes to cook seasonal produce is key, either to cook unfamiliar varieties or to process the large quantities that are usually available at the peak of the season. And then finally, there were a couple of suggestions that it's really important to make the local food space more inclusive. And so this first person was talking about wanting more opportunities for lower middle class young folks to be involved in local agriculture. And the second person was saying that they had received EBT credit for SNAP food retailers through their son's school. The farmers market doubled the amount if they purchased produce. And the extra money for produce allowed them to extend their budget and buy some of the more expensive foods, such as fish or nuts. So I would just want to summarize by going through a few key takeaways. First, it seems like respondents' shopping habits were really heavily focused on convenience and selection. And when these respondents were consciously thinking about it, supporting living wages, water quality protection, and supporting organic practices were of the highest importance to respondents. They generally had positive but somewhat weak feelings about local food, and respondents were shopping at farmers markets and CSAs primarily to support and connect to local farms and farmers while getting their groceries. But they were having diverse experiences with the variety and selection, and some people were enjoying that and some people were not. And they were concerned about waste and convenience issues. And then finally, respondents were aware of and concerned about farmland loss, and they're interested in taking action, at least to some degree. So I'm going to wrap it up here and pass it back to Sarah, who's going to help us facilitate a Q&A and get broken up into groups to start a discussion with some of these questions that we'll revisit. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Anna. Great, so thank you to all of our presenters. We have a few discussion questions that we're going to get into in just a few minutes. We invite you all to join some breakout rooms. But before we do that, does anybody have any questions or comments for our presenters? You can put them in the chat or use the raise hand function.
Sarah, I may just read this one out loud. Heidi says, I work a lot on science, policy connections, and my research found that relationships are a core way to connect your priority audience with scientists. No less so for farmers, since most folks don't know farmers. Maybe a dating service of sorts, which is social, fun, and exploratory. It's a great comment.
Yeah, that's great. And that reminds me of what Stevie mentioned. Pre-COVID times, the co-op offered opportunities for members and farmers to get together. Do you see that kind of thing coming back soon, Stevie?
I mean, it really depends. I mean, week to week, with everything changing with social protocols and safety and being an open food space, especially with an open kitchen, it's very difficult to safely get these kinds of get-togethers back together. We've been successful with a couple wine tastings to kind of feel it out, but as far as larger groups that include younger adults, children, difficult to say.
Heidi said, this summer could be a good time to test out how social to be and at what scale. I agree. Libby, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, sorry, my internet connection is unstable, so no video right now, but I just wanted to make mention of the fact that at the beginning of COVID, there was a concerted effort to sort of like coalesce the sort of farm finder platform. And I own and operate a farm in Monroe and have seen, I believe that that's created a lot more sort of access, instantaneous access for people to find out more about farms and the variety of farms around them. So that feels similar to, if not exactly the same, similar to the sort of thing that Heidi was kind of referencing, as how to connect individuals and consumers with the things that they're interested in and the farmers themselves.
Great.
And maybe I'll jump into kind of to pose to Libby since she's here, and Christy. I know that in conversations, it sounds like as a farmer, your time is limited, obviously. We all get the same amount of hours in the day, but there is that conscious choice between going to a farmer's market versus having a CSA on your property. I'm just wondering if either of you could address what a difficult choice that is and how you've made the choice you have.
This is Christy. Personally, yeah, exactly. That's the exact challenge. And so thus far, I've always opted for the CSA instead of doing a farmer's market. And I actually have never done a farmer's market. And I noticed that somebody had commented, or there was a quote of somebody talking about doing smaller markets during the week. And I understand what they're saying, but there's a lot that goes into preparing for the farmer's market, like all of the, you have to get up like before the sun does and to harvest everything and get it into cold storage, and then traveling with it and keeping it cool and presentable, and everything gets squeezed and all of that stuff, and the setup and all of the stuff that goes along with it. And so it does take a lot of time, and I can't do it all. So for me, I've decided to do the CSA and then on-farm sales at my farm, but I have not done a farmer's market.
And I guess, so we were doing primarily farmers markets and wholesale restaurant sales prior to the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, we started an online store and a CSA. And I definitely stopped going to farmers markets for the first couple of years. And I definitely can see the benefits of both of them. I think based on the markets, the different markets we have, there was real value for me in being at a Seattle farmers market where I could connect with chefs directly. Some of those folks came to me and were searching for produce, but being in proximity in Seattle and making deliveries, wholesale deliveries there was definitely an added benefit to sort of being in that place and having access to different kinds of customers, not just the direct retail customers at the farmers market. From a sort of time perspective, I was imagining when I was shifting to a CSA that I might have a few more hours available to me based on the fact that I wasn't commuting and that there was a little less time sort of physically standing behind tables at the market. I found that a lot of that time actually went into the digital communications, the management of the customers. So it kind of, regardless of where you're standing, you're either putting in the time doing the marketing, standing there at your stand, or you're having to do it, digitally and connecting with folks that way. So that's been my experience.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to say from our test group related to the survey, that relationship with the farmer was also very key. So trying to be the farmer, but also be the face and the relationship builder as a farmer, I think is a great part of that challenge and time taker. But clearly from the survey, very important to the respondents to have that connection to where their food is coming from. So how do you do it all? Yeah.
Great. So Linda, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so having been farming for 30 years and we've done farmers markets, I did a CSA for a number of years and doing on-farm sales. And really what it comes down to is how much money can you make? Are you going to make more money going to a farmer's market? You go to a farmer's market, you're not on the farm. Your farmers markets that are going to make the best money are going to be the Seattle farmers markets. And, when you're there, you're not at the farm. And, what about the product after the farmer's market? Your chances are you are not going to sell out that day at the farmer's market. So what happens to that product afterwards? That's got to go someplace too. So really, it all comes down to where are you going to make money? How much can you afford to be off the farm? And where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck? So for us, it's on-farm stores. And people can come on our system and buy whatever they want to. And in Snohomish County, there's a lot of opportunities to do that. You can put in a farm stand. As long as it's small enough, there's no need to get a permit for it. It's allowed. I think there's a lot of different options. And the awareness of local food right now is incredibly high, especially because of the pandemic. They were coming out in groves to buy as much product as they could possibly find. I was getting phone calls nonstop about, who can I buy from? And CSAs, just Google CSA and it'll come up right in your area. It takes all your information like we don't like, but put in CSA and every single one near you pops up. The other thing is Washington Tilth. Washington Tilth has a guide, which used to be the Puget Sound Fresh Guide, and they call it something different now. But there's a lot of stuff out there that I think needs to be front and center as well.